Crab survival beneath the ice, the king crab trapping journey in Alaska. You wouldn't know it by looking. To the naked eye, it's just a sheet of ice. A blank, blinding white that stretches endlessly into the horizon. The kind of silence that hums in your ears. The kind of cold that doesn't bite, it burrows, deep into your chest, your bones, your memory. But beneath that silence, 3 meters down, something ancient stirs. Billions of lives crawl across the ocean floor. Crimson-armored giants. Creatures older than empires. They are the kings of this hidden realm, Paralithodes Kamskaticus, the Alaskan king crab. Each one is a prize. A spiny, living jewel worth its weight in gold. And every year, for a few short weeks, the hunt begins. But this is no ordinary hunt. This is war with the cold. A test of human will against nature's most ruthless elements. They say Alaska doesn't forgive the weak. And when winter comes, it doesn't even speak. It just watches, unblinking, as the temperature plunges to -40. The sea hardens into steel. The wind howls like a forgotten god. And still, they come. The fishermen. Bundled in layers soaked with salt and diesel. Faces cracked by wind. Eyes that no longer flinch at frostbite. These are not men chasing fortune. These are men who've learned to survive where comfort dies. Because out here, survival is the only luxury. Everything else, warmth, rest, safety, is earned with pain. The process is brutal, and it starts before dawn. Even the stars seem hesitant to rise. The boats sit idle, anchored like ghosts at the edge of the ice. Men crouch over frozen steel, preparing the crab pots, giant cages made of iron and instinct. Each weighs over 300 pounds. Each must be baited, balanced, and ready to be fed into the mouth of the sea. But first, ice. The crew takes turns drilling, smashing, cutting. 3 meters down, the sea waits. And until that hole is carved, the ocean is a stranger. Unreachable. Untouched. Each strike of the drill is a prayer. Not for luck, but for progress. Not for safety, but for survival. Once the hole is wide enough, the traps are lowered. One by one. Slowly. Delicately. As if the sea might change its mind and swallow the entire crew. They descend into blackness. Sinking hundreds of meters until the bait rests on the ocean floor. There, in the frigid dark, the scent of rotting fish calls to the kings. And then, the waiting begins. It's not the waiting that breaks you. It's the silence. No engine rumble. No radio chatter. Just the sound of ice shifting, moaning like a living thing. The cold presses in. Through gloves. Through boots. Through every memory of warmth you've ever had. They build fires near the hole. Not for comfort, just to keep fingers from stiffening into claws. They huddle in silence. Some pray. Others don't bother. But all of them know, every second costs something. Finally, when the time is right, the winches scream. The ropes tighten. Steel groans. And the cages rise. The first glimpse is always the same, claws. Spikes. Movement. Life. Red shells gleaming with frost. Giant crabs, some weighing up to 8 kilograms, thrashing against the steel. It's not a haul. It's a resurrection. Proof that beneath the ice, there is life. That suffering can bloom into survival. They count. Sort. Measure. Only the largest, healthiest crabs are kept. The rest, too small, too young, are released back to the depths. Because here, even among hunters, there is respect. Not everything beneath the sea is for taking. Each trip is a gamble. Each haul could be the last. Sometimes, the cages come up empty. Other times, the ropes freeze. Sometimes, the ice cracks too close to the hole. And on the worst days, a man falls in. If you've never heard the scream of someone falling through ice, you've never known true panic. It's not a scream of pain. It's a scream of surprise, like the world has betrayed you. And under the ice, the ocean doesn't wait. It pulls fast. It pulls cold. It pulls hard. That's why the crew never works alone. Every hand on deck is a lifeline. Every glance, a silent pact, I'll watch your back if you watch mine. The rewards? They're immense. Each season, Alaska yields nearly 12,000 tons of king crab. The global value? Over $6 billion. A single crab can fetch a small fortune on distant tables, from Tokyo to New York. But if you ask these men why they do it, they wouldn't say money. They'd say legacy. Because this life, the life of ice and steel and frostbitten hope, isn't just about profit. It's about proving something. That man still belongs in nature. That endurance still matters. That in a world of instant comfort, there are still those willing to bleed for a living. You might never meet them. They don't make the news. They don't go viral. They don't tweet from the boats. But out there, far from your screens, they exist. Men who brave the kind of cold that stops breath. Men who don't flinch when the ocean growls. Men who live by tides and die by time. They are the last of a kind. Not heroes. Not victims. Just survivors. And in the silence beneath the ice, they write their story, one trap at a time. So the next time you see a crab on your plate, gleaming red with lemon and butter, remember. It was once a flicker in the dark. A heartbeat beneath 3 meters of ice. And somewhere, a man held a rope with frozen hands, praying it would rise. Because beneath every luxury, there is someone who fought the cold. The nightmare from the sea, blue crabs and the silent invasion of Italy. To the untrained eye, it was just a crab. A dash of blue across the claws. A hardened shell speckled like sun-baked stone. A creature that scuttled across sandy seabeds and tidal flats, barely noticed, hardly feared. In the waters of the Chesapeake Bay in America, it was an icon, steamed, seasoned, served by the bucket. Familiar. Profitable. Harmless. But across the ocean, under a different sun, it became something else entirely. A shadow. A swarm. A nightmare. It began quietly, like most ecological disasters do. Fishermen in the northern lagoons of Italy first noticed the change. Their nets came up heavier, not with what they were meant to catch, but with blue crabs, hundreds of them, pinching, writhing, tearing through mesh like living scissors. At first, they were curious. Then alarmed. Then overwhelmed. The blue crab, Calanectes sapidus, had no business being there. It was never native to the Mediterranean. No predator knew how to hunt it. No balance had been set. And that, precisely, was the problem. The crab came likely through ballast water, tiny larval forms flushed from the tanks of ships crossing from America, drifting into Italian harbors without notice. And in this new land of shallow lagoons, warm summers, and an unchecked buffet of soft-shelled prey, it found paradise. Within a single season, their numbers exploded. Tens of thousands. Then millions. They crept across the beds of native mussels and clams, snapping at anything soft and slow. They shredded oyster nurseries and devoured juvenile fish before they ever had a chance to grow. They weren't just thriving, they were conquering. Nature had no time to adapt. And neither did the fishermen. In the Veneto and Emilia-Romagna regions, aquaculture had flourished for generations. Families made their living from the quiet patience of shellfish farming, sowing baby clams in the tidal mud and waiting months, sometimes years, for harvest. It was a cycle rooted in rhythm, tradition, and faith in the sea. But the sea had changed. Where once there were rows of thriving clams, now there were barren scars, dug up and devoured by the invaders. The blue crabs didn't just eat the crop, they ravaged the habitat, turning carefully cultivated beds into wastelands. Some families lost everything. Years of work, erased in weeks. And still the crabs came. Biologists arrived with clipboards and concerned eyes. They studied, they sampled, they warned. The blue crab, they said, was not just a pest, it was an ecological wrecking ball. Its appetite was insatiable. Its reproduction rate astounding. A single female could lay up to 2 million eggs in her lifetime. Without natural predators, every egg had a chance. But this wasn't just science. This was survival. Local economies buckled. Clam prices soared. Restaurants changed menus. Entire supply chains collapsed as harvests failed. Coastal towns that once boasted of fresh seafood and stable income now spoke only of loss. Trawlers sat idle. Voices fell quiet. And on the shore, the crabs kept marching. The nightmare reached beyond economics. It reached into culture. Identity. In Italy, seafood isn't just a meal, it's memory. Generations gathered around dishes tied to place, to sea, to story. Now, that story was bleeding. And for many, the blue crab became not just an invader, but a symbol. A reminder of how fragile everything was. People began calling it Il Nemico Blue, the blue enemy. A name that echoed on docks and in headlines. In schools, children were taught how to identify it. In town halls, mayors pleaded for state support. In labs, scientists raced to understand it. Could it be harvested commercially? Could predators be introduced? Could traps help hold the line? But the sea has no borders. And the crabs had already spread. South to Tuscany. West toward the French Riviera. Even north toward the Adriatic. Like ink in water, the invasion was unstoppable. And yet, within the crisis, there was a strange poetry. Nature doesn't play favorites. It doesn't follow politics or prayers. It only seeks balance. And when balance is broken, by trade, by climate, by ignorance, it finds its own way to restore it. Even if that restoration comes in the form of chaos. The blue crab is not evil. It did not choose to invade. It was carried by us. By the ships we sail. The waters we churn. The systems we disturb without care. This is not just a story about a crab. It is a story about us. About what happens when we look away too long. There is a lagoon in the Delta where the water turns glassy before dawn. Where once, if you walked with your boots sunk in mud, you could feel the pulse of the sea beneath you. Life bloomed there in quiet patterns, the opening of a clam shell, the swirl of sediment, the soft scrape of something ancient moving slowly. Now, that rhythm is gone. The crabs have taken it. But the memory remains. In the silence of empty nets. In the hands of fishermen that no longer tremble from work, but from worry. In the hushed prayers whispered before each tide. Today, Italy is fighting back. New strategies emerge, some hopeful, some desperate. Millions of euros are being poured into solutions. Government grants help harvest and control the population. Local chefs are encouraged to introduce the blue crab into cuisine, turning predator into profit. And slowly, awareness spreads. Because this is no longer just an Italian problem. It is a European one. A global one. A reminder that in a world so tightly connected, even the smallest passenger in the hull of a cargo ship can change everything. We talk often of rising seas, of melting glaciers, of disappearing forests. But sometimes, the most terrifying changes come not in towering waves, but in tiny claws. Scuttling silently beneath the surface. Waiting. The blue crab is still here. It hides beneath docks. Clambers across rocks. spawns in shadow. But it has taught us something. That the sea is not just a place of wonder, but of warning. That every ecosystem is a thread, and when pulled, the unraveling is quick. That vigilance must become our instinct. And that nature, when wounded, does not always cry. Sometimes, it creeps. So the next time you stand at a quiet shore, and the water laps softly at your feet, ask yourself what lies beneath. Not all invasions roar. Some whisper. Some pinch. And some are blue. They came in the night. Not in armies. Not with banners. But with claws. Blue claws. By the time the fisherman realized what was happening, it was already too late. Nets meant for sea bream came up heavy, twisting, pinching masses of blue crabs. The gentle rhythm of the Italian lagoons had been disturbed. A silent invasion was unfolding. These crabs weren't native. They didn't belong here. But they had arrived. And they were not leaving. At first, there was confusion. Then frustration. Then fear. The blue crab, Calanectes sapidus, once a beloved ingredient in American kitchens, had turned into a monster across the Atlantic. With no natural predators in Italy's coastal waters and a terrifying ability to reproduce, they began devouring everything: clams, oysters, young fish, even seagrass roots. The balance of centuries-old ecosystems teetered. Local fishermen watched their livelihoods crumble in silence. Traps came up empty of profit, full of claws. What once was a peaceful harvest became a daily struggle against an enemy that bred faster than despair. But this is not a story of defeat. It is a story of adaptation. Of how a people stared down a crisis, and decided to bite back. They didn't call in the military. They called in the chefs. Across Italy's lagoon communities, Chioggia, Comacchio, Venice, the solution didn't come from laboratories or weapons, but from stoves. The blue crab could not be eradicated by force, so they turned to flavor. They chose to eat their way through the invasion. And so began one of the most peculiar and inspiring ecological counterattacks in modern history, the rise of gastronomic resistance. At first, it was a whisper, a plate served in a tucked-away trattoria, a new twist on spaghetti alle vongole featuring sweet, firm blue crab meat. Patrons raised eyebrows, then forks. Then came the television spots. The cooking shows. The celebrity chefs calling it the Mediterranean treasure. Soon, the government stepped in. Funds flowed to support fishermen who dared to pivot from victim to hunter. Local campaigns encouraged consumption. The message was simple and elegant. If you can't beat it, eat it. In a small coastal town, a new festival was born. The Blue Crab Food Fair. What began as a desperate attempt to deal with ecological overload became a vibrant celebration. The streets filled with the aroma of garlic, lemon, and wine steaming off sautéed crab legs. Children danced with painted crab masks. Musicians played under banners that read, "Il nemico è buono, the enemy is delicious." Mothers who had never touched a crab recipe began steaming, grilling, frying. Old fishermen, once broken by loss, now smiled as they hauled in traps bursting with value. Tourists arrived not to mourn a dying sea, but to taste a new beginning. The blue crab became more than food. It became a story. A metaphor. A transformation. From plague to plate. From threat to tradition. In doing so, Italians taught the world something profound. That culture is not just identity. It is a weapon. It is a tool of survival. When wielded with creativity, it can reclaim even the most fragile hopes. They called it soft resistance. A way to fight with flavors instead of fear. And slowly, ever so slowly, the tides shifted. Blue crab populations, once unchallenged, began to stabilize. Not vanish, but balance. Fishermen, once drowning in economic ruin, found a new market. Local restaurants that had once struggled now took pride in offering crab of the day specialties. Menus glowed with dishes like Granchio Blue alla Veneziana, crab risotto with lemon zest, grilled crab tails with wild herbs. The economy found breath again, in the steam rising from a plate. But beyond the income, beyond the recipes, something deeper stirred. A sense of dignity. Because adaptation is not surrender. It is intelligence in motion. It is the art of dancing through disaster and coming out singing. And what a song it was. A song made of boiling pots, crackling shells, laughter around family tables. A song of resilience. Of evolution. Of humanity doing what it does best, not resisting change, but reshaping it to its advantage. There is poetry in this kind of fight. To answer ecological disruption not with despair, but with dinner. To wield forks as finely as swords. To make survival delicious. Today, in the lagoons of Italy, the water is still stirred by blue claws. But they are no longer strangers. They are ingredients. They are opportunity. They are proof that sometimes, the only way out, is through. Through invention. Through unity. Through culture. To eat is to survive. But to cook. To cook is to win. Would you have guessed that a crab could teach us so much? That beneath its shell hides not just meat, but meaning. That even in claws there is a kind of peace. If only we learn how to hold them right. So if you ever find yourself in a town beside the sea, and the air smells of salt and lemon, and a crab sits proudly on your plate, don't just taste it. Remember the story behind it. And know that this meal, once born of crisis, is now a celebration of human creativity at its best. Because when invasion meets invention, only one can stay on the menu.